All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, nation? It's your boy GS Luke here. I'll find a way to get myself into this full screen, but we're here with our live stream for the Charles Schwab Challenge. But I'm going to start this one off a little bit differently. If you guys haven't already seen the news quite yet, our guy DGen75 passed away over the weekend. Still doesn't even feel real. Being able to say that to you guys, it's just terrible. All of us are in grieving as a community. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are feeling down and out of it yourselves. Everyone grieves their own ways. And personally, my favorite way, I shouldn't say my favorite way, but the most effective way for me to get through things is to spend time with my friends, which in a lot of cases is you guys down there in the chat, as well as to do the things that I love. And I know all of us love PGA DFS. That's why we're all here together. And of course, the big guy DGen75 had maybe the most love of all out there for this sport that we play fantasy for. And it's a crazy sport. It's a crazy sport of life that we all play out there. Sometimes it's completely unfair, like what would happen with James, but we're going to remember him in a positive way here. And we're going to let his legacy live on. We're going to take a lot of his things that he's taught us over the years. And I can say as a tout, as somebody that's known him for over 3 years at this point, he's taught me more than anyone else has in this industry. And it's because he's always given me that information. He's never been a closed book. In fact, he shared a lot of times more than he probably should when it comes to that process. So that's why he's a legend. That's why so many of us love DGen75. And I just had to start off the live stream by saying that because he's going to live forever on the SHIPIT Nation channel here. I mean, all of us absolutely have all that love for him. I'm going to incorporate those things going forward. And here on this channel, we're going to take a lot of time to reflect and remember the big guy here over the next few months. The main which will be at the US Open. I know Tambo's planning a big live stream for that. So I want all of you guys to be able to stop on by for that. I'm not sure on the exact time, but it'll be just before the US Open. But all these live streams, whether it's using his great, just 10 out of 10 nicknames that he had for players, whether it's calling guys Donkey Chalk, you know, we'll always have that with our guy DGen75. So not with us in flesh anymore, but he's going to be with us in spirit, even more so that more than ever, I would say, there with DGen. And hopefully you guys are feeling the same way. So we're going to talk about golf here in a minute, but I did want to take at least a few to talk through that because frankly, sometimes there's bigger things at play than this golf tournament. But the one thing I do know about my guy, James, and I know this without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, is that he'd want us to do this live stream. He'd want us to go through the slate this week, the weather, find an edge there if we can, talk ownership, make sure you guys are ready for all of your action. So we're going to do that too, because I know he'd want us to make sure that we can do that. So we'll get to that here in a few minutes, but let's catch up on my guys down there in chat, which I will say I'm here for you guys as well. I've dealt with my fair share of grieving in my life, unfortunately. This isn't about me whatsoever, but if you guys are dealing with anything, I'm always here for you. And I've got some good perspective on the topic, I would say. So if you feel like you need somebody to vent to about anything whatsoever, I'm here for all of you guys, I'd say. We got Goku there, always early to the chat. What an absolute legend. DFS, IPA as well. Two of the sweaty tryhards that we always see in here. Let's go up. Gangrene says, everyone hit the like button. Let's go ahead and get after it. Colin down there too. Remember the big guy says, let's ship this thing for him this weekend. Let's do that as well. I know he'd like us to break it down, but even better than that, let's take down a contest or two. That would be awesome stuff. You haven't looked at anything this week? Yeah, man, it was a weird one for me. Honestly, I felt very distracted this week based on what was happening. So I'm right there with you. I ended up having to look at it with what I do as a job, but it was a little bit tougher than most weeks. You said, Big Luke Gang, rest in peace to the Donkey Chalk GOAT. Yeah, man, Donkey Chalk just going to live forever in these PGA DFS streets. What's up, Luke? Thank you for doing what I do. Appreciate you, man. What's going on, sites? Absolutely, let's take it down for the big guy. Have you made our lineup set? You better not have out there. I know my guy DGen would start off with his live streams on that. So if you've built your lineups already, guys are slappies. And I've got to say I'm a slappy because I've built mine. It's a little bit different for me though. Pay attention to the guy in the back. Yeah, hey, guy in the back there, you guys better be listening because we're going to go through some nuggets here. Yeah, wake him up, get him a little coffee, a little booster shot if he needs it. Nothing would make Dejan happier than seeing us grind in and out. That's what I'm thinking, man. What's going on, Bryant? Yeah, man, dude, those quotes, dude, the guy is just a legend. You got Nick down here too, says, let's take the time to get away from the inevitable thoughts. Absolutely. And that's what I love about this. And I'll just share this real quickly. When I was growing up, I lost my father at a very, very young age. And it hit me very, very hard. It still hits me hard even thinking about it. But the people that got me through that moment were my friends. They skipped school. My friends' parents, I got to give them credit too. They let my friends skip school so that I could just go and do things that a normal kid would do. And in the weeks after that, that's what got me through that sort of thing. So that's why I think this live stream is going to do a lot of people a lot of good here, where we can get our minds away from all of that sort of stuff. So I'm right there with you, man. Let's ship all the money this week. Amen to that. I mean, look at the chat down there, guys. You guys are lighting it up with the love for the big guy, so you'll love to see that. He said, thanks for doing this. Of course, Solly with the great thoughts. One of one, like Ross said. He's a true one of one, James, that is, out here in the industry. Antonio with similar thoughts. I appreciate all the love that you guys are giving down there. One thing I'd say, any sort of nicknames that you've got, any sort of fond memories you've got of the big guy, feel free to throw them down in chat, right? We can reminisce a little bit as we do this. Dollar Bill down there, C. Floyd, the Peach down there too. Appreciate all of you guys. You did HRRR. You know we're about to talk about it. And got Jack down there. And what else we got? Did I make my lineups? Yeah, absolutely not. All right, let's talk about this. So let's get through this slate. Like I said, wanted to make sure we could do that off the bat. I knew it was going to get me at some point. But let's bring up the regular stuff on here and get through this. So we got ourselves the Charles Schwab Challenge. And what I know about this golf course is that it's one where the slappies normally get punished, because this is a much more difficult golf course than most people would think. And the reason why I mean the slappies get punished is they'll play the guys that come in with really good form, that weren't playing even remotely similar style golf courses. And then when you get them on a track that's strategic, that has small greens, where around the green it's not tough, but it's not easy compared to some of the courses that these guys have been playing. Your lower form guys, your guys that just aren't the best players on tour, especially with the short game, tend to get exposed around Colonial. So cut lines normally over par around this course, scoring average typically in the half a stroke to 1 stroke over par range. And I like that when it comes to fantasy. You don't have to shoot 20 to 25 under par to make it to the optimal lineup. If you have players in that 6 to 8 under par range this week, that's going to be close to that top 10, top 20, and it's going to be close to a optimal performance, I'd say, in those large field GPPs. So I think this golf course is very fair, but it's also one where weather can come into play. And I think for Showdown over the first few days is where you're really going to find any sort of an edge when it comes to the Showdown streets, or really in the weather streets at all, I should say, because it looks pretty flat the first 2 days. So first off, on Thursday, it is going to be a little bit calmer on the first half of the day. It's also going to be a little bit cooler as well. So anytime you have those higher temperatures in the afternoon, a lot of times it'll make the course firmer and faster, which in turn adds a little bit of difficulty. That on top of the fact that the winds go from 3 to maybe 7 miles an hour in the morning to closer to 10 to 13 miles an hour for most of the afternoon does have me think that there's a half a stroke difference there. So first half might play like a quarter of a stroke over par. Second half might be closer to like a 0.75 strokes over par. The one thing I would note about this forecast is that what you can see there towards the very end is some sort of a storm that's supposed to come through. So it looks like there's going to be like about a half an inch of rain that drops on this golf course. I would expect most of play to be done by about 7 p.m., which is right about when they're expecting that storm to come through. But there's a chance that right before the storm hits, that the winds get nasty. That's normally what happens when you have a front coming through. And you can see that reflected with the winds. They kick up from 13 to like 20 miles an hour right away. Also, the gusts go from moderate around 15 miles an hour, which isn't that much to worry about, to closer to 30 to 40 miles an hour. So the guys that are out there late in the PM wave tomorrow, I think are going to be especially affected by this weather. And the one thing I'll say is that they're calling for thunderstorms in some of the forecast. So there's a chance that they get ripped off the golf course. But even then, the PM wave is going to play a bit harder. You've got all that wind to contend with, those greens firming up. And I think even the earlier guys on that PM wave are probably playing to a half a stroke difference in terms of being harder compared to the AM wave. Now, those later guys, maybe it gets even to a larger difference than that if they have to actually play through some rain and those higher winds. But if they end up taking them off the golf course, those very late guys could actually get a break finishing up their round in the morning. So I don't think that this weather is very straightforward. I would say for Showdown that it is pretty straightforward. You want to play the morning guys. But in terms of the impact with those very late PM players, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to end up getting there. But when we look to Friday, so we go to the day after that, it looks pretty similar when we look at this NEM forecast. The first 4 or 5 hours are calling for much lower winds than the rest of the day. And towards the very end of that PM wave, you can see the winds kick up once again. So I think if you want to be very specific about it, like you want to avoid the guys that are going off very late on either day, just because there's a chance they have to play through a storm tomorrow afternoon, or there's a chance that on Friday, the very late starters then have to play through winds kicking up just a little bit more than what they were throughout the rest of the day. But I think that that would be to break ties at best. I personally don't see a massive weather edge on this kind of a week. But what I will say about Texas weather, and it's what I did a few weeks ago when we had the chat at the CJ Cup Byron Nelson, was that you almost want to stack both waves at these Texas golf courses, at least if you are a 150 max player, because a lot of crazy stuff can happen. And I already showed you guys an example of where we have variance in this forecast and we don't really know what's going to happen, because look at this NEM model. They're having those storms coming in closer to like 5 p.m. If they're thunderstorms, and they are calling for thunderstorms at 6 p.m. on this Thursday model here, then there's a chance that, sure, they start the first half of their round in the nasty conditions tomorrow afternoon. But because of that delay, which might even last the entire afternoon, because they still got to warm up, right? You got to think they got to get them out there on the golf course before it starts to get dark. They might get to play half their round Friday morning and then go out there and play an entire round on Friday morning. So then they would get 27 quote unquote morning holes in that kind of scenario, right? The end of their second round would probably go to like 1, 2 p.m., but still they'd be getting some of the best conditions overall for most of their 2 rounds, and they would avoid that nasty storm. Now, if they play through it, then the other wave would possibly be the one that gets the advantage, because tomorrow that advantage might even be like a stroke because of the extra storm stuff in the afternoon. And then the next day, maybe it flattens out. Maybe it's only like a quarter or a half a stroke difference then that could lead to a half a stroke difference towards the either wave. So I personally could see it going either way. I would say that more than likely it's going to be a non-factor. It's more than likely just going to cancel out over the 2 days. But I think there are scenarios where one wave or the other could see a little bit of an advantage. So I'm personally playing it pretty straight up. And I didn't even do this on purpose. It's just kind of naturally getting players that are all stacked towards both sides. I have 7% stacked towards the PM side, and I think it was like 7.5% stacked towards the other side of things. So 15% of my 100% of my lineups are done with some sort of a weather edge, and it's just by chance that I was getting those sort of combinations. So it's not a massive part of my process. I know that my guy DJ loved to get super sweaty when it came to these weather edges. And that's kind of what I was thinking through when we were going through that little bit of storm tomorrow afternoon, because I think there could be a lot of variance involved with that kind of a storm. And those that wouldn't really stay on top of that. So if you have this windy.com subscription, which by the way, a lot of you should probably have this subscription if you're playing PGA DFS every single week, just keep an eye on it overnight. If that storm ends up looking like more and more of a possibility and more of thunderstorms for tomorrow afternoon, then you might want to consider going with the PM AM stack and hoping that they play like 27 of those 36 holes with the better conditions on Friday morning. And on top of just having the lower winds, it's worth pointing this out too. This rain would make the course easier. So if you get to play 9 of your holes after the rain comes through and in nutted conditions, it's not just the fact that you have calm conditions the next morning. It's the fact that you get to throw dartboards on greens that should be extremely soft. So that's why you might want to keep an eye on that sort of a potential edge. And if that ends up coming to fruition, we see a lot of the local forecasts calling for thunderstorms, then you might see me in single entries, some of my higher dollar kind of builds, going to a 6-0 in that direction. But as a 150 max player for a majority of my exposure, you guys are going to see me doing that very often, going out there and playing a massive weather edge in all my lineups, unless it's something that is definitive. in the forecast that we're looking at. And as of right now, it's all conjecture based on which side is going to get the better side of it. Hence why I'm taking that kind of a strategy. So that's what it is when it comes to the weather edge this week. Let me go ahead and share my projections next, which we're going to use to talk through some ownership. And we're going to go through the 8K plus range when it comes to the ownership up top. So we'll go through any players in particular, by the way, that you're curious about when it comes to projected ownership. These are my projections when it comes to the main slate this week, so they don't necessarily reflect what you have on the SHIPIT Nation website, but we're going to use it as a guide map here to talk through the ownership decisions up top. So we'll talk about some of the more popular guys in the 8, 9, and 10K range, where you can potentially get different to the field, and not even just on specific players, but also with your lineup construction, because I think there's a clear decision that you have to make with the first player, right? Whether you're playing Scotty or not, and then that's going to have a drastic impact on the rest of your lineup construction, because Scotty Scheffler is nearly $14,000 this week. So it's not like he's 12 grand and it has, some impact on your strategy across the rest of the board. You play a Scotty Scheffler and it puts you into the low $7,000 range when it comes to your average salary remaining, which is a huge handicap. It isn't impossible to play Scotty Scheffler lineups, but if you get off of Scotty, a chalky lineup is going to look a whole lot different than if you used a Scotty Scheffler. So we're going to talk through the implications of making that sort of a pivot. Because, for example, if you use Scotty Scheffler and then you used anyone up here at the top end of the board, so it's going to be tough to get a 9K guy in there. But if you used a high range 8K guy as your second man in with the Scotty Scheffler, you're going to be extremely different, because most people aren't going to be that aggressive with their salary. They're going to play Scotty, but then they're going to drop down to maybe the top end of the 7s, maybe the bottom end of the 8s when it comes to their second man in, but they aren't going to be as bullish and take, especially one of those 9K range players as their second man in. Whereas if you fade a Scotty Scheffler up top, you're not going to see many studs and duds lineups. You're going to see people taking one of these guys up top, in my opinion. I'm basing this off of some of the sims that I've seen across various different websites, and just the ownership in general, and getting a sense for what the field's going to do. But if you fade a Scotty Scheffler, I don't see many people stacking the top end of the board here, going a Fleetwood, then a Daniel Berger is your second man in, and then maybe a Poston is your third man in, and then going back studs and duds with 2 6K guys and then a bottom into the 7K guy to round off that kind of lineup. What you're mostly going to see is a Daniel Berger, the most popular player outside of Scotty up top, dropping down to maybe an Aaron Rai, Harris English as your second man in. Third man in, pretty balanced lineup. Maybe it's a Siwoo, more than likely probably one of these mid-K, 8K guys that you're landing as a third man in there. That sort of lineup is going to be a lot more popular than if you dropped off of Scotty and you loaded up on some of these 9K range players. So it's not just going to be these ownership numbers that we talk about here, but also some of that strategy involved when it comes to actually putting together your lineups. But any specific players that you're curious about with a deep dive, feel free to go ahead and let me know. We've got shots gained metrics on here. So with the few players that I'm going to point out, we're going to reference their profiles over the last 12 and over the last 24 measured rounds. So anyone that you guys want me to further deep dive, you can let me know down there as well. And also we got course history, recent form to go through, whatever you guys are curious about on your plays for research. I need a sip of water. Fire water. So you're talking about the Topo Chico that he has. Now, just water for me today, but not quite going that far. Cheers to DGen. Absolutely, man. One of the last things you saw DGen say is that he missed an opportunity to do the emergency stream for the emergency room. Oh my God, dude. His sense of humor is great. Yeah, I mean, that would have been epic if he was able to do that sort of thing. But that's just the kind of mindset he had, right? Even when he wasn't feeling the best, he was thinking about the community, what he could do to help all of us. We don't take a week off after majors. It's the law. And hey, yeah, some people have the hangover after these kind of things, but not me. Not all of us that are part of the sweaty tryhard community. It's another week to take down the GPP, so we're going to get it. Who was DGen's favorite golfer to play? I actually don't know that, Renell, so I don't want to give you the wrong answer. I know guys that he hated playing. I can give you some of those. He thought Rory was an absolute loser. He likes Scotty Scheffler a lot. I don't know. I'll let chat answer that one. They might know a little bit better than me. I don't know if he really played favorites. I don't think that was his style, at least from what I understood. But I'm sure Ropat, he liked that nickname for Harris English. I don't know. I'll let chat answer that for you. Way to go, Bob. Said not Patrick Rogers. You know that. Way to go, Bob, by the way. One of my favorite comments that he used to put out there. Patrick Rogers, by the way, just to give you another one, Renell, a player that he hates. He's not a big Patrick Rogers guy. Other than, what's the other one that Dejan said? He's like, unless we don't play Donkey Chalk unless we do. Sorry, I'm completely butchering that. But it's the same thing with Patrick Rogers. He hated Patrick Rogers, but when he touted him as a play, the guy nearly won the golf tournament. Absolutely, man. I'm right there with you. It's a tough week for me as well. Thoughts on Davis Thompson and Bud Cauley? So Bud Cauley really fits the style of golf course. I play him at courses where you don't have to be a bomber, and this would qualify at only 7,300 yards. Davis Thompson, I don't think he's a particularly good course fit, but the difference between Thompson and Cauley is that Cauley's a little bit higher owned than some of the other guys around him, whereas a Davis Thompson is lower owned than some of the other guys around him. And there's a clear reason for that. Bud Cauley's had a much better 2025 than Davis Thompson, but long term, Thompson's clearly the better player. Thompson has tour win. He's got a lot of top 5, top 10s over the last calendar season. So I got to say, thoughts on both of them. They would be slightly above average on both players. I would 6.5 out of 10, I'd say, on both of them, but it's for different reasons. Bud Cauley, I think he's setting up well for this style of golf course, whereas Davis Thompson, I think, is a good leverage play just because he's not going to be super highly owned. And compared to the guys around him, I mean, let's go to that portion of the board and just find Davis for you guys. He's here at $8,800. He's a better player than Keith Mitchell long-term. And I know Keith Mitchell's had the hot hand with the approach play lately, but Thompson has a much more accomplished record over the last 2 seasons. He's a much better player than a Davis Riley. Siwoo Kim, the same level player, I'd say, as like a Davis Thompson these days. But, Thompson, if you look at the ownership angle, he's half the ownership of a Siwoo Kim. And I like Siwoo this week. I'm playing Siwoo in lineups. I'll say that right off the bat. I like him that much. But when you compare these two, and if you're really trying to find leverage on this portion of the board, I like guys like Davis Thompson because long-term, he's a much better player than a lot of people are going to give him credit for. And that's for leverage purposes. The reason why I have a little bit more Siwoo Kim in my exposure, in fact, I don't even think I'm playing Davis Thompson this week. I'm just going to do a double check on that. If he was in my last set of 150, I don't think he was. Yeah, so yeah, he's not in my last set of 150 lineups. But if I needed to get different in this range, I don't. I've got plenty of other spots. I'm mixing in that differentiation. Davis Thompson would be one of the first guys I would consider for that. You got your Ranch Waters for the big guy all weekend. And I've got to say, Ranch Water is a great drink, by the way, if you guys haven't tried it. It's super smooth and decently refreshing. So it's something you can actually drink on the golf course. Crazy defending champ with excellent course history is going to go under-owned. So you're talking about Davis Riley. Well, there's a clear reason for that. And I'm not sure 10% would be under-owned. It's because he's way more expensive now. He's normally like a $7,500 golfer. So anyone that has hesitation with Riley, that's the reason for it. Now, if you're okay with the price tag, you like the form, you like the fact that he's defending champ, you could play him. I had a conversation with my guy Spence, Tee It Off Sports, yesterday on the Mayo Media Network. And it was a really good conversation on the Davis Riley take because me and him agree. We're not playing him this week. We don't think that at $8,600 and 10% ownership that he was worthy of playing. But, and we both put this out there, we get why some people are. The course history, the fact that he finished in the top 5 at a major. I mean, that's massive for him. He's in the best form. It's not even just that last week. He's been in decent form for the last month. However, you're now paying the most premium that you could possibly pay on Davis Riley. He's never been in the 8K range this year. He's never been double-digit owned in 2025. So that would be the argument against it. So I either think Davis Riley is going to have a really good week this week, potentially top 10, top 5, and be a player that you have to have in GPPs, or I think he misses the cut and misses it by like 3 or 4. I really don't think there's an in-between. He's a very volatile player. So if I was going to get over the field on Riley, I personally don't have in my exposure, it would be large field GPPs just because I think he's such a high-risk player. But like me and Spence kind of attested to yesterday, there's a ton of upside there too. I mean, obvious. He's won this golf tournament before. He has that top 5 finish. You can't completely ignore that. I just think it should be done in the right format. Like cash, I would probably steer clear of playing a Davis Riley. I just don't think that he's the safest option to be playing in that sort of a lineup. But large field GPPs, especially like the big $5 or $25, I could see myself getting there, man. This week is for the big guy. Cheers to that, man. Cheers to James. Big guy, always loved a good weather edge, making me already tilt towards a weather stack. I feel you, man. He's exactly. If you can find a weather edge, I completely agree with James on this. It's the best thing you can have in PGA DFS because not enough people play it. And I know that's something that he would mention all the time. The stats back this up as well. Even when there's a clear-cut one, like the weather looks horribly different between the two different waves, like 10%, 15% of people play a full-on weather stack. Imagine when there's not a big weather edge. I mean, hardly anyone actually has the stones to go out there and do so. So that's the one thing I liked about him is that he wasn't afraid to go all in on that sort of thing. Yeah, not a pour. Yeah, you got to. I think it's $20 a year now. By the way, they upped the price on people. So yeah, you can't be a pour out there. And yeah, I was looking for that tidbit before you guys caught me down there in chat. I appreciate you guys. Swamp ass Lukey gloves. That is not a sight I want to see this weekend. I hope he plays well, but I hope we don't have to see that swamp ass. Thoughts on Harris English? So I love Harry English this week. So he's one of my top plays, one of the first few guys I wanted to bet outright. Couldn't find a number I felt adequate with, so I bet him top 5 at plus 825. What I like about Harry English would be the form. So kind of like O'Reilly, he has that form heading in, but he's a really good bent grass putter. He has a high ball flight, which I think will help on these firmer greens. This golf course was renovated before last year's event, so the greens are still a little bit firmer and faster than what we're going to have here in a few years. In a few years, I think the scoring at this course is going to get better as time goes on. But currently, this is a course where having a ball flight that's higher than other players is going to help you hit it close to the hole. So yeah, I like English quite a bit. He's about 15% owned, so he's not going to be completely overlooked. If you're looking for leverage, that'd be guys like Keith Mitchell, a Robert McIntyre. They're about half of that ownership. If you're looking for the chalk in that range, which I don't think the chalk would be something you're actually out seeking in that sort of range, but that would be Aaron Wright, about 17.5%. Ranch water for the night. I wish I had some now. You guys are, I got to say, ranch water sounds awfully good about now. Scale of 1 to 10 on EVR. So love the 1 to 10 questions. EVR, 6.5, 7 out of 10, because he's been ball striking the ever living heck out of it recently. So to show you what we're talking about, let's go to the last 24 rounds and bring up his shots gained record, which is always my go-to with these players. I like the last 24 rounds because it gives us a pretty decent sample size. He's gaining in all 3 categories. Most significantly off the tee, he is a player that's long and accurate, which at this course that pays. Like a Jason Kokrak was able to do when he won this golf tournament. This isn't usually a course where people hit driver all day, but if you have a week where you hit driver and you hit all the fairways, you're at such an advantage around this course because you have flip wedge into almost every par 4 on the back 9 that you can eviscerate it with the scoring. And EVR is already a high birdie percentage player. So always give me the guys that are hot with their tee to green play, especially that ball striking off the tee and on approach. And yeah, he's low owned. So 6.5, 7 out of 10. I like it there. And just the double check, because I always like to be fully transparent with what I'm doing myself. I don't believe I'm playing him, but he was one of the guys that I like. Yeah, he just made his way out of my player pool. I liked somebody around him just a little bit more, but he was one of the last few guys on the chopping block. Let's put it that way. Who are some of the guys that might not be in great form, but fit this course well? Great question. So there are a few that kind of come to mind for me. So Tom Kim. So we're going to mention Tom Kim. We'll actually just do it right now. Tom Kim would be that sort of player. The recent form, number 110 in the field. In fact, he's losing about a stroke per round over his last 12 measured rounds, but he normally plays well courses where it's about the accuracy over the distance off the tee. And that's why I meant with, like, if you can hit the ball a long way and you can hit fairways, it pays. But the easier way to get it done around Colonial is just to hit a whole bunch of fairways. That's historically what you've seen pay around here in most iterations of this Charles Schwab Challenge. And Tom Kim is the exact kind of skill set. Mid to long iron player, straight off the tee, decent bent grass putting stats as well. If we go over here, you can see he's about a third of a stroke better per round on bent grass than what you have on other surfaces on tour. Tom Kim would be your kind of guy. But just to give you a few others, let's see. Echevarria's in form. Will Hostler, I guess. Hostler's a really good bent grass putter. He's good with the mid to short irons, I would say, at that sort of price tag. He'd be another one that's not in the best form either. He's number 55 in that category. The shorter, more positional guys are what you're looking for. And if you're going to try and find any semblance of form to latch onto, look for iron play. Like if they're gaining with the iron play, losing in the other three categories, and they're more of a positional driver, those could be those low-end gems that you're looking for. Oh, Slapdick Patrick Rogers. Slapdick. That's another one of those great nicknames. Who's the donkey chalk this week? So yeah, let's talk through it. So not to steal my guys' segment or anything, but let's point out the guys I'd have to classify as donkey chalk. And I'm going to use my best judgment on pointing out these players because DGen sometimes would bend the rules depending on where it was. But Scottie Scheffler has to be donkey chalk. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's 44% owned. He would probably be the kind of guy that, he'd say, we don't play donkey chalk unless we do because it's the world #1 player that you have with Scottie Scheffler. So he's undoubtedly donkey chalk, but he's also $14,000. On top of that, though, an Aaron Riot, like 18%. I'd have to think that he'd point that out as too high ownership right there. Even a Daniel Berger at nearly 20% ownership. You can't really compare him to Scottie Scheffler at 44% because he's $3,000, $4,000 cheaper. So you compare him to the guys around him, and he's 4% higher owned than a Fleetwood. He's about 5.5%, almost 5.5% higher owned than a Jordan Spieth. So he'd likely be donkey chalk. A Siwoo Kim would be donkey chalk at 14.5%. He's double the ownership of a Davis Thompson, a Ben Griffin. And then towards the bottom end of the 8K range, not as much donkey chalk. And then to give you guys a few extras, because I know he threw in a few 7K donkey chalks on some of those live streams over the years, let me find a few lower end donkey chalks. I don't want to say Thorbjorn Olesen is donkey chalk, but he's probably okay chalk towards the top end of the 7K range. Ryan Gerard at 12%, donkey chalk. At least that's where I would expect DGen to put him. Who else do we have? Hisatune. He's like 8% owned this week in my projections, maybe getting towards that sort of thing. And then Andrew Putnam down in the 6K range. He's only $6,700. I've got Putnam at about 8% projected owned. That's probably donkey chalk too. So I love the question. It's one of my favorite segments that we had out there. And I'm sure when we have the US Open live stream in a little bit under half a month, that we'll have some sound bits when it comes to that. And if not, I'm going to throw it by the team and make sure we can include something like that. Davis Thompson, does he fit the course at all? You were landing in that 8K range. Typically not a guy that you go to. I don't know if I'd say he's a good course fit because he is a long player off the tee. He's not inaccurate, though. He is like a tour average accuracy guy, which that distance, if you could have a spike week with the accuracy, could pay off. So that's why I think he's a good GPP play this week, just because he's a high pedigree player. But I wouldn't say he's my favorite course fit, though. An Oklahoma State winner would be very, very fitting. Who's an Oklahoma State guy? So we got Ricky. He's Oklahoma State. Is Sam Stevens. I think he's also from there. Wyndham Clark was at Oklahoma State, but he's not on the field this week. Yeah, maybe one of those two. Except when we do. That's what I was looking for. Absolutely going to miss the emergency streams too, man. Like you said, one of the most knowledgeable and entertaining shows out there. I don't think I could have said it better myself. Thoughts on Tommy Fleetwood? So he's $10,000. He's like a 6 out of 10 for me this week. And here's what I say about Tommy. Should he be the second most expensive player in this field? Yes. But is that a good price tag on Tommy Fleetwood? Absolutely not, because he's at $10,000. A lot of times in that 10K range, our qualifying criteria for whether we want to play somebody is like, are they going to win this golf tournament? He's probably not going to because he's never won a PGA Tour event before. However, and this is the big however that saves him at a 6, because Tommy Fleetwood at 10 grand, way too expensive. But I'm playing Tommy this week because he's a perfect course fit. It's an accuracy first kind of course that plays directly into his skill set. And it's a golf course with the mid to short irons that you can separate yourself from the field. Also a course that you have to be stout around the green on. And Tommy Fleetwood is good at all of those different things. So I'm playing him. It's kind of like a disgusting play because he's $10,000, way more expensive than he should be. But because he's a little bit lower owned than Daniel Berger, by the way, one of my guys, one of my favorite players on tour, he won at this golf course before. So I kind of get why people are playing him. But Fleetwood's a better player. And I'll say that even as a Daniel Berger stan. I am one of the biggest fans of the guy in the world. I mean, the people on my Patreon community, people on my YouTube channel that have watched me over the years, know I've been waiting for him to come back for so long, and I'm happy that he's playing so well and he's back towards the top end of the sport. But am I going to be delusional enough to say that he's a better player than Tommy Fleetwood? Absolutely fucking not. And I know Berger has won multiple times on tour. Again, I'm a big Daniel Berger guy. So this is coming from one of the people that should not be saying this. Fleetwood is an exponentially more consistent player. So if you're going to give me lower ownership on the guy that's $100 more expensive, then I'm going to personally make that sort of pivot. So yeah, Tommy Ladd, I don't love him this week, but I liked him enough to play him. Let's put him that way. I liked him a little bit more than some of the more chalky players. You believe he was for Sam Ryder as well? Okay. Yeah, my guy Sam Ryder, by the way. I'm a big fan of Sam Ryder too. High birdie percentage player. So when you can make a cut with Sam Ryder, you're going to get a lot of DraftKings points out of him. So he's another one you might want to throw into some lineups yourselves, guys. Deep dive on Hall and Eckroat. So what I like about Harry Hall, at least my model this week, is the shots gained on bent grass. So if you go over here to the right, he gains about 2/3 of a stroke per round. The form is solid too. And however, and this is a big however with Harry Hall, 2 of the events where these shots gained are coming from are alternate field events. He did not play in the majors. He did not play in some of the signature field events. So the consequence of that is that he beat up on a Myrtle Beach Classic field. He beat up on the alternate field event that they had before that, where, finishing in the top 25 for a guy that's an above average PGA Tour player is almost like a guarantee for a guy like a Harry Hall. So I don't think that he's a terrible play this week. I play him a lot more than most people do. However, the reason why I'm off of him on a week like this is I think that some of the stat models, mine included, my stat model loves him this week. However, I always keep in mind when I'm looking at my modeling where the shots gained metrics are coming from, because there are times I look at the DP World Tour metrics. I use those in my modeling. I have to look at the DP World Tour guys that are coming from overseas with that same kind of skepticism, because they're playing in much, much weaker fields against that kind of a competition. So, to use them apples to apples against the PGA Tour players that are playing in the toughest fields every single week is, I don't think, very fair. So that's why I give Harry Hall a slight downgrade, and he's getting ownership too. That's the other kind of reason that I'm staying off of him personally, is that he's getting that kind of ownership behind him. And then let's look at Eckroat. So Eckroat, I want to look at the shots gained metrics on. And it's not really like the bent grass putting stats that would be an argument for playing in Eckroat. It's more so that long-term, he's one of the more consistent ball strikers that you have in this bottom end of the 7K range. One of the few players that is gaining in both categories. And Alejandro Tosti fits that, but he's more of that bomber style. And Austin Eckroat, who's won at the Cognizant Classic before, another course where it's more about the accuracy than it is the distance off the tee. Eckroat fits this style of golf course as well. It's that same kind of thing off the tee, more of the mid to shorter irons that you're hitting into some of the greens. And, he's been really terrible with the short game lately, but that's something that can bounce back a little bit quicker than most categories. If he was losing hemorrhaging strokes off the tee and on approach, it might be a different story on whether I'd want to play Austin. But when it's the 2 short game categories, which can kind of come and go for these tour players from week to week, that's why I'll take him for a little bit of a bounce back. So he made his way into my player pool, and the ownership on Eckroat, just to double check that on the other sheet, I believe I had him at sub 5%. So if you use him in lineups, you're also getting a downtick with the ownership, which is half the reason for playing him. And yeah, in my projections, I've got him at 3.1% projected ownership, which is more than fair. You throw him in 7 to 8% of your lineups and you're over 2x the field. I thought it was worth doing, at least in my 150 max. You think DGen's favorite play this week was the low-owned guy? That he was a Cam Davis slut. And yeah, I think you're right, Nick. I don't think he ever picked favorites. That's kind of my take on it as well. And Cam Davis slut, though, he I think, at least from what I understood, he liked the guys that scored a lot, right? When they made cuts, they didn't just score 20 to 30 DraftKings points. They're getting at least to that 40, 50 mark because of the birdies they posted, which I've got to say, I've got a soft spot for that myself. Did you know, Nick, that he designed this golf course, that he helped Gil Hans when they did the renovation? If not, Nick, I have a feeling that you're playing Ryan Palmer this week. What's going on, Jordan? Paying a premium for Riley is for the donkeys. I'm with you, man. But I do want to put it out there, though, that I kind of get why some of the donkeys are doing it. However, I'm not going to do it myself, right? I put my stance out there for sure. Riley has a lot of obligations that he's never had to do before. I didn't think about it that way, Ross, but yeah, that's another way to think about a potential fade as well. I appreciate you, Jordan. Thank you for popping on in here. He said Ryder versus Norlander at 6,800. So yeah, let's look at the shots gained metrics over the last 24 round sample size with the sample that we go with. Approach play is going to favor a Norlander. You can see Norlander's gaining over a stroke in that category, but much like a Harry Hall, you have to keep in mind that some of the shots gained metrics are being pulled from those alternate field events. And I actually think it's the same thing for Ryder. So maybe we don't hold that against him, but it's just a tale of two different stat profiles. Ryder's a little bit more short game dependent, gaining over a stroke with the putter. Henrik Norlander is literally doing it all with his iron play. And what I'll say long-term though, is that Ryder is the better player out of the two. So if you're using more of like closer to a 50 round sample size, and especially if you just narrow it down to regular PGA Tour events, Sam Ryder is going to have about a half a stroke shots gained advantage over a Henrik Norlander. So that's personally where like my long-term course fit stands on a player like Sam Ryder. It'll slightly favor him in this scenario, but I think both are decent plays. Like you can see compared to the other guys in this range, you're not going to see many players that are gaining over a stroke per round in any one category. And once you get over that 1 stroke per round form metric, and this isn't the last 12 rounds, this is the last 24 measured rounds. This is a full 6 event sample size that we're looking at on this tab over here. Once you get into that rare air, gaining over a stroke per round, that is the elite of the elite when it comes to those categories. In fact, you're hardly ever going to see that. I know Ricky Castillo is gaining over a stroke per round on approach, but that's over his last 12 measured rounds. Last 24 measured rounds, only 0.65 shots gained approach per round. So yeah, don't sleep on those two. I think the real answer to your question is to play both of them. If you're only choosing between one lineup, that's a tougher question. Thoughts on Berger? So love my guy Berger. Huge fan of his, like I was saying before, but I do worry that he's the highest owned guy up top, and I don't know if he's necessarily earned that quite yet. He's in the $10,000 range, which I think is pretty wild at this point. It was, and I even said this in the fall swing. If you guys have been following my YouTube content, what I do in the GS Luke YouTube channel, in the fall, I talked up Daniel Berger every single event. And at a certain point, it became like a joke, right? It's because I was talking him up every week, and it was the same exact reasoning. And this is what I said back then. I said, Daniel Berger will be $10,000 next year, $10,000, because he's that kind of player. And I know that. Sure. So like he's finally gotten to that point, but now he's mega chalk and he's that kind of price tag. I just feel like at first, like when he first gets up to this kind of price tag, that he probably shouldn't be chalky, because now he's getting the respect that he probably should from the lines makers, from the DraftKings pricers over here with the DraftKings salaries. And now people want to play him more than they ever have. I mean, in the fall swing, I was getting him at 7 to 10% ownership. The beginning of 2025 this year, he was still in the 7, maybe 8K range when it came to his price tag. And I was still only getting like 10 to 12%. I just don't feel like it's worth it now that you're paying just a premium, not only in terms of the price, but also from that ownership angle. So I still hope he plays well. Like I said, he's one of my favorite dudes out there, but I can't do it at those kind of numbers. Luke, we're killing props this week. You'll be in Florida. Oh God. If you guys haven't heard yet, Nick is my good luck charm when it comes to playing props. So let's double up the units on some prop slips. That could be a whole lot of fun. Okay, you covered what I was asking about Riley from another question, so let's ask about Smalley. Okay, some stats for the season, but you see that his irons under 200 is the weakest part. Yeah, so I have a few worries about Smalley myself, Steven. He is more of like a driver and long iron player than anything, and he's the kind of guy that in these shorter courses has not proven it over his PGA Tour career. So I'm kind of sketchy on Smalley as well. He's not my favorite play this week. What are my odds on Riley to miss the cut? I'm not sure, but maybe check out like DraftKings and report back to us, because I'm not sure about that. You said fade all the donkey chalk, and if you're going to play slapdicks, play your own slapdicks. Yeah, those are a few tenets from the DGen 75 Bible. Good ones to live by, if I must say so myself. You love James and his zest for life. Amen to that. He had a good zest on everything he did. Get that bag, Nick. Yeah, man, Brant, I got to say, if you don't play props yourself, you might want to get into a state where you can, because Nick is the good luck charm. He brings a lot of it for us. Swamp Ass Glover's the biggest lock of the slate. Yeah, he is probably going to get it. It's 90 degrees, huh? He's 100% going to have the Swamp Ass. He just better not wear the pants where it sticks out like a sore thumb. Any thoughts on Wacky Valimaki? I always like the approach stats for Valimaki. So if we go to the last 24 measured rounds, you'll see that he's gaining about 0.6 strokes per round. It's why I like Castillo. It's why Castillo is one of my main value plays this week. You can say that a lot of the same things about Sami Välimäki, so I'm all for it. Thoughts on Hoffman? So let's look at the shots gained. What I'll say about Hoffman is that he got hot earlier this year, then he kind of fell off a bit, but the approach stats and the off the tee play has still been there, even over this recent lull when it comes to his finishes. Like, we haven't had any flashy starts from Charlie Hoffman, but tee to green stats have still been into the positive. So I'd have to give him like a 6.5 out of 10. Nothing flashy, but if you're going to look at a stat profile, what you want to see is the tee to green stats carrying these players. The putter can come and go, as we've said a few times during this live stream. Your golf swing is normally a little bit more permanent, right? You'll see that carried for a couple months at a time at times. Another guy to point out here, I'm not playing Neil Shipley this week, but Neil Shipley, don't be surprised if you like top 20s, top 10s. He's a lot better player than that price tag. In fact, I may even add him to my player pool after we get off of here, just because I think he's going to have a good week. And the reason I say that with Neil Shipley, by the way, complete aside now, he's a grinder. He plays well at harder golf courses. You've heard it from himself in some of his interviews before, mentioning that he doesn't like a winning score close to 20 under par. And there are just certain players like that. Scotty Scheffler's one, Aaron Rye's one. A lot of your players that don't have a super high birdie percentage are players that fit those style of courses. And Neil, at least if you believe him in his interview, is that kind of player. So might have to add him to a few. The little hobbit, yeah, Brian Harman, poor guy. He gets ragged on by everyone, but it's deserved. He does look like a little leprechaun out there. Late to the show, said thank you, Luke, and all the content creators. Of course, yeah, we're all family, like you said. It's tough, but like I said, we got to get our minds off it a little bit too. And I think this is hopefully going to do some healing for some people. What about thoughts on Spieth? You've got a gut feeling. I would love to say that this is a Jordan Spieth week. I'm so off on Jordan this week. In fact, my take on Jordan is that I don't know how I feel about him this week. I normally have a pretty good sense on what's going to happen for the guy, for good or worse, which a lot of times I take advantage of for props. My prop hit rate, this is something I track. I don't do it for every player, but I do track my specific hit rate on Jordan Spieth props because it's over 73% for my career. So I've got to say, I normally have a pretty good read on the guy, but not for this event, man. I could see it going really well for him. He's a good short iron player, 100 to 200 yards. He's one of the best players over the last 5 years on the PGA Tour. And I mean, that's been his big kryptonite lately. He just can't hit his irons. He's been driving the ball beautifully. His putter has been decent at times. He's also had a few letdown weeks too, but that's just golf for you. You're always going to have letdown weeks when it comes to the short game. But Jordan Spieth, if he can find the irons this week at a golf course that kind of fits that, it could be electric factory because he's gained a bunch of strokes off the tee in every event this year. The putter, he's had weeks where he's gained 3 or 4 strokes. Around the green, we know he's one of the best around the green players of all time. Non-exaggeration, he's quite literally maybe the best around the green player that has ever graced the entire earth before. But the approach play is the problem. He's been losing like a half a stroke per round this year. So I hope he flips it around, man. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that it's not going to be this week. That I get, and I hope I'm wrong, like I said, but I don't feel like it's the best setup for him. Maybe I missed it yet, but have I not mentioned Spieth? Yeah, we gave the thoughts on him there with Jake, but I'm so conflicted, man, because he's going to be like average to below average ownership. So I'm playing him. Like, I don't want to make what I just said sound, by the way, like I'm not playing him. I obviously am. I play him every single week. It does something I will say is that I sometimes play favorites in my player pool. And Jordan is one that I do it with. Every time he plays, he will be in my player pool. That's just a fact with what I do with my DFS lineups. But I don't feel like it's a great week. I like to at least throw that out there because my take on him isn't that positive. Is Ryan Palmer a sleeper? Didn't he play a role in the redesign? He did, Dennis, but I would be remiss if I didn't show you the shots gained metrics on him. It has been absolute poo-poo on Ryan Palmer. He's lost 2 strokes per round on approach. He's lost a stroke per round with the putter. There's always the or he could factor, but he's playing worse golf than Michael Block lately, and that's kind of hard to do, to play worse than Michael Block. The approach him. Oh, that's one of the best nicknames out there. Yeah, he loved playing Andrew, huh? Ropat too. I'm hoping he has himself a good week. Any insight on David Ford? So before this week, he was an amateur. This is his first ever professional event. I don't think we have any real shots gained metrics to look at on Ford, but he was a really good collegiate player, the kind of guy that was top 5 the entire season, his last 2 seasons on the NCAA circuit. So I think he's a high pedigree player, but we've yet to see him do anything professionally. So I would take the wait and see approach myself, especially because he's $6,600. It would be different if he was like $6,000 and unowned. He's going to be unowned this week, but he's $6,600. So I'm personally going to take a wait and see approach. But if you believe in high pedigree players, then it's not completely out of question for that to happen. Ventura's Oklahoma State. Okay. Another one to throw into that potential winner ring. Thoughts on Siwoo and Harmon this week? Love the course fit with both. You play them at like the shorter, more positional golf courses, courses where it's like about like the mid to shorter irons. They're both not the longest players. Love them. I think he was an Oklahoma State fan, but yeah, Oklahoma fan. Yeah, he's a complicated man, as Dalla was saying down there. Taylor Moore thoughts. So let's take a look. Taylor Moore's a high birdie percentage player who I believe didn't DJ like Taylor Moore, or maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe I'm getting that one backwards. But Taylor Moore, he was a gainer in 2 of the 4 categories over his last 24 rounds. He's gaining off the tee, and then he's gaining around the green. He's just got to find a hot putter, find some hot approach play. And what I'll say is that this putting stat being into the negative does surprise me, as he's normally a much better putter than what you've seen over the last 24 rounds. So I kind of like the regression for Taylor Moore in that category. And just to double check his putting stats on the surface, let's see. He's normally a gainer on the grass. So yeah, 6 out of 10 on a Taylor Moore. He's actually kind of a guy I wish I played more of. I wish I had him in lineups. Any interest in Bud Colley's evil cousin, Spud Colley? Don't know who Spud Colley is, but yeah, my guy Bud Colley, I could see playing this week. Deep dive Kanaya. Okay, let's do the Kanaya deep dive. I kind of wish you didn't ask that question because he's one of my best sleeper plays this week, but we'll go through it just because I don't want to share him with that many people to Peach. So, but I'll go through it. You know that. He's gaining off the tee. He's more of like a shorter player. His one real bugaboo would be the iron play, but he's a short game specialist. So my role with Kanaya, and he's completely underrated. No one plays the guy because no one really knows who he is, but he's got a lot more made cuts than everyone else in the 6K range. He's made well over 50% of his cuts this year, and he does it with his positioning. You put him on a long, hard golf course, Kanaya's not going to have his best week, but you put him on a golf course where it's about hitting fairways in your short wedges, and he's going to have a chance to go out there and find success. So that's the Kanaya record over there. Let's look at the bent grass stats. That is something I don't know about Kanaya. Let's see. We're going to mention Danny Walker here in a few minutes, by the way. He is losing on bent grass, but it's a small sample size. It is his first year, I should say, out here on the PGA Tour. So that probably has a lot to do with that. Berger Moonwalk. I don't know about the Moonwalk, but he's 18% owned. We'll see. Got her up for the Oklahoma side. Okay. Thoughts on Taylor Dixon? So really good bent grass putting stats. Other than that, though, it's been a little bit of hot form lately that I think is getting people onto him. And I've got to say, I don't want to completely give away whether I'm playing him or not. Actually, I'll just say, yeah, I'm using him this week. But look at this. It's like the sneakiest stat profile ever. And it kind of like the Kanaya question. It annoys me when you guys have these sharp questions because then people in chat are now going to know about these potential sleeper plays to use, but that's okay. Hey, if anyone's going to know about it, I want it to be you guys that are watching, right? The people that help support the community, keep this thing going, support me as a content creator as well. Yeah, Taylor Dixon is like a good value play down low. I'm using him in some lineups because his ball striking has been okay enough. Like he's been about a neutral in these 2 categories, and he's gaining a crap ton of strokes putting. And what you'll see if you take a look at the stats for this year, so if we go the whole way down here to Taylor Dixon, which, where is he? Is that him there? Yeah, at $6,100. He's getting that 1.52 shots gained on bent grass. So compared to his last 24-round sample size, that's 1.28 strokes better than his last 24-round sample size. So all of these shots gained that you see for Dixon, where like he's gone off and had like by far the most ridiculously good stats towards the bottom end of the board, have been on this grass. And that because he's a PGA Tour rookie, right? That's why the shots gained is the exact same there. So yeah, Dixon, I hate that I had to point him out because now, you know, instead of 0.5% owned, he might be like 2.5% owned in cheap. Actually, probably not that drastic a difference. Maybe he goes from like 1 to 1.5% owned. He's still a good play. I'll still be using him in some lineups. That's okay. We'll share him with a few more people. F-bomb number 1. Oh, dude, by the way, where's that graphic we can add to that. I'm more than willing to add to the F-bomb counter, by the way, and add money to it. I'm not sure what the going rate is on those, but sign me up for at least one. And for the good measure, I'm going to add a few more on top of it. Just for the heck of it, right? Because I know for the live stream at the US Open, we're doing something for that. Berger Spieth Ryder Cup pairing would be heaven for me. It would. By the way, I'm going to be there at the Ryder Cup, so I'm really looking forward to that week. It's going to be an expensive one, though, but Scotty Scheffler in his outright last week is going to finance that one and make it a little bit more doable. Any thoughts on Matt Kuchar? Decent course history and plays this tournament routinely. Yeah, he plays this golf tournament routinely because it suits his game. So kind of like your Brian Harmons, your Hobbits of the world that don't hit the ball the long way, your players that lose strokes off the tee typically, this is an absolute paradise for them. So I like Coochie. I would say the one thing about it is that because of the rain, it might play a little bit longer than what he's used to. But yeah, like a 5.5, 6 out of 10. Mark Hubbard, 6.5 out of 10 sites. Reason why I like a Hubbard is that he fits the style of golf course. And for DraftKings specifically, so talking about DFS purposes, it's maybe even a 7 out of 10 because he's a player that routinely outscores his placement when it comes to his DraftKings scoring. And it's because he's a very aggressive player. Last year, for example, in the PGA Tour, he was a top 35 player on tour in birdie or better percentage. And that was despite him having one of his worst years on tour over the last 2 or 3 years. He had a little bit of a falling off last year, did not have nearly as many of those top end finishes. But what remained in his game was all the birdies that he was posting. The issue and why he wasn't having the top level finishes is he was making a whole lot of bogeys as well, which for DraftKings is okay. If you can get that sort of guy through the cut line, get him 72 holes, make 15 to 20 birdies on the week, that could pay off that kind of a price tag. So yeah, DraftKings 7 out of 10, like for the week in general, probably like a 6, 6.5 out of 10 because the form hasn't been great. The weaknesses can't be completely overlooked, but I think you're onto something. Good old G-Dubs or Lee Hodges. So if you're talking about DraftKings plays or my take on either player, Gary Woodland, decent form before a few weeks ago, has kind of fallen off. So he'd be more of like a bounce back candidate that you're looking to play. Will be super low owned with G-Dubs. I've got him at sub 3% ownership. Lee Hodges, let me double check his ownership in my projections. I also don't think that he's getting that much steam. So let me just confirm that before I give you that information. So a little bit more steam than Gary. I've got him about 2% higher owned than where I have Woodland at, but both average to below average ownership. And from the projection standpoint, they're almost at the same exact number. So it was a toss up between the two for me. I'm playing one of the two, and it is Gary that I'm playing. So I guess if I had to choose one of the two, I would go in that direction, but it was pretty close. It was the ownership that was the deciding factor for me. 166 watching and only 67 likes means that we have 100 donkey dicks in here. For the love of DGen, hit the like button. You heard the guy, though. We should be able to get that up to 150. Come on. If you guys haven't already hit it, it's not going to bite you if you hit that like button for you. Is Whaley going to be low owned? Seems like a sleeper if so. I'm thinking so, man. In terms of the projected ownership, I'll look him up as well to give you an exact idea. But I've got him as a below average ownership player for sure. In fact, in my projections, I've got him below 3% for my large field GPPs. So if your worry was the ownership, then worry no more. You can use him as a pivot. Matt McCarty Whisperer, what do we feel? You're saying as the McCarty Whisperer, what do we think? Yeah, he's another one that I've gotten right a few times. Here's what I'll say, Alan. I don't have a massive take on him this week. It's kind of like the Jordan Spieth one where it's like, you know, I could see it going both ways. I am playing him though, Alan. So just because I don't feel like he's the best play this week does not mean I'm not using him. My guys, like McCarty and Spieth, McCarty is becoming one of those guys real quickly for me. I just play them every time they play. And I think that's a good thing to have sometimes is you just play your slapdicks. And they're not playing like slapdicks right now. Both of them, in fact, playing really good golf between McCarty and Spieth. But even if they were out of form and they were stinking it up right now, they'd still be in my player pool too. So if you've got your slappies, the guys that you play no matter what, stick to them by God's means. Because if you get off of those kind of players, for example, if you were a big Keith Mitchell guy the last few months, please play him this week. Because I can guarantee you, if you played Keith Mitchell, like all these events, and then you're hopping off right now, he's going to finish top 10 this week and burn you. So don't be that person. Is it hard to study taking time off, family first, and coming back strong? Absolutely, Joanne. Everyone grieves in their own way. So can't blame you for it, but we'll be here when you get back, Joanne. So we'll hear for you as well. Let us know if you guys need anything. Thoughts on Aaron Pumpernickel? So my guy, Aaron Rye, the 2-glove wonder, he sets up really well at these harder kind of tracks where you're not going to get a -20 winner. But just like my guy Berger, just like a Harry English and a Siwoo Kim, that kind of a course fit is coming with a consequence. And that consequence is higher ownership. So I don't think he's a terrible play by any means, but he is the sort of player that I would think about twice before playing. One and done, you're looking at English or Berger. I like English this week. Not to say that I'm 100% going to be right about that, Ron, but I would lean Harris English just because I like the putting stats a little bit more than what we have with Daniel Berger. Course history would favor Daniel Berger, but I think Berger is going to be extremely popular in one and done as well. So I think with English, you're at least getting the player that I prefer out of the two. Obviously, the jury's out on that one with what ends up happening. But from the game theory angle, which is the other thing you have to consider with one and done, is that if you get Harris English right, he's going to be lower owned than Daniel Berger, then you're going to get more out of it because you're not going to share him with, let's say, 5 to 10% of your one and done that's using a Daniel Berger. So I like going with English for both of those reasons. Win one for the big guy, Nick. You heard her. We got, what do we think? Who do I think is going to get steamed and then moonwalk in favor of the big guy? That's a tough one. He's so good at that, and I'm so terrible. I kind of figuring that stuff out. I'll give you my best guess, but I will admit I'm not the best at this stuff. Leave that to the professionals when it comes to like the moonwalking and the steam and whatnot. I would say that there's a chance, based on what I've heard so far, that Daniel Berger gets steamed just because I've had so many people ask about him. And because I'm not the best at like figuring this out, I'm just going to go based on my intuition here. I have to imagine that if you're getting a lot of questions about a player, that people are trying to figure out whether to use them or not, and that they're going to be the more popular options. So for example, we've seen a bunch of Siwoo questions. We've had Davis Riley brought up a few times. So like maybe they're getting some of the steam. In terms of who gets squeezed, Jordan Spieth. I mean, we didn't even mention his name until 5 minutes ago. That feels like a name that might be a little bit overlooked. Mav McNeely does not feel like I've heard him anywhere this week, whereas a Poston, and there's reason for it, Poston's played a lot better over the last few events, might be taking away some of the steam from McNeely. Maybe one of those two, and then who else might get squeezed? Yeah, probably those guys. That's my best guess at it. The GOAT is going to be a lot better at it than me, that's for sure. The Showdown Hoedown, great name for the show, by the way. Kind of a research question. Do I ever use any AI to check out the things on golfers? No. Hell no. Artificial intelligence, in my opinion, and this is a hot take, I'm not going to spend very much time on it. I don't know if it's a good thing for us as for humanity and like us as a future. First off, I think it's going to dumb us down. And I think that some of the insights from AI right now are superficial at best. So absolutely not. I let the brain do all of it for now. I've got to say, if I could set up an AI to make my decisions for me and it actually works, yeah, I'm all ears. But yeah, I don't think it's possible with what we have now. I think it's a lot of superficial stuff that we've got in the AI space right now. Maybe not in a few years, but I do wonder when we get to that point, like when AI could help us out with these sort of things, that it's going to be a net negative. I'm somebody that's worked in tech before, electrical engineer, so not quite artificial intelligence or anything like that. I've got some skepticism about it, to say the least. Any Carson Young love? So not a name I was expecting to hear. So I guess the answer to your question would be no, but I wouldn't say that there's disdain for Carson Young either, because he is the sort of player that would historically pop at a shorter golf course like this, more positional sort of venue. So I wouldn't throw it past him to have a good week. He said, Berger's a baller, just not back to where he was yet. I agree with you, man. Exactly. And that's kind of my take on it, Ryan, is like I was the hipster last year going, Daniel Berger's the truth. He's going to be 9-10 grand next year. You guys are all going to see it, right? And now it's happened so fast. And I'm like, pump the brakes, guys. Like, I even thought I was kind of crazy saying that shit last year, right? I thought, I was like, wow, Luke, like you're going off on a limb saying that. Like the guy had a back surgery. Is he really ever going to be that guy again? Like, let me be the one to pump the brakes on everyone and say, like, trust me, I'm glad he's playing well, but he's got a long way to go. What's the Goddard ownership looking like? Less than 5%. So if the ownership was the issue there, Hermit, no issues at all. You can fire him up, all cylinders going. Goddard going to be low owned? Yes, for sure. Thoughts on Ben Martin? So another name along with Carson Young that I was not expecting to hear this week. I've got him at like a 4 out of 10. The form has not been that great. When he's played well, it's been in the alternate field events. So if you're looking at some of your modeling and you're seeing them pop, there's would be that it's the alternate field events that are in that sample size. So yeah, 4 to 10, unfortunately. I don't think he's unplayable though, like GPPs especially. If you need to take a super low owned guy at sub 5%, you could go with it. And he said, is Grazium a good course fit? Not at all. So course fit, what we're looking for this week would be more accuracy off the tee. Grazium's a bomber more than an accuracy player. And then we want short irons, like clubs from 175 yards and in. And he's more of a long iron specialist. So yeah, not a great course fit. Not to say that he's a terrible play. He's a good birdie maker. He makes a lot more birdies than his peers. So if he can make the cut line, he's the kind of player that you'd expect to outscore his placement position. But I wouldn't say he's a great course fit. He said Spieth might miss the cut. I don't think you're wrong there. He easily could miss the cut. Your most risky lineup has Spieth and Mitchell. I like that. Large field GPPs is the place to play those kind of guys. The Sooner Fight Song reminds you of James. By the way, Sooner Fight Song is one of the GOATs out there. So heck of a song they have out there. Thoughts on Hideki? Hideki, oh, another guy that I didn't want to spill the beans on, but I like the fact that he's low owned this week. He's a pivot play that I'm using in the 9K range. He hasn't played here much at all. In fact, the last time he played at Colonial was 10 years ago in 2014. It was a completely different golf tournament with the name, but it was at the same golf course and at a top 10. So I like the course fit, at least based on that sample size. But he is a player that's played well at the Sony Open. Waialae Country Club is the same kind of test where it's more accuracy off the tee and then shorter clubs into the greens. Also small undulated green complexes, which are going to be the same kind of thing that you have at Colonial. So I think he's a sneaky good play. I really didn't even want to mention all of that because any sort of steam that gets onto Hideki is going to make him a worse play. But the 200 or so people, the 1,000 people that may see this on replay or whatnot, are not going to drastically impact the ownership here, right? Like, I'm sure I'll talk a couple people onto playing him based on what I just said, but not enough to make him go to like 12 or 13% owned. So yeah, if we're getting a low into Hideki Matsuyama here, I'm going to be thrilled to be using him in lineups. Form is lower than some of the other players. I mean, he's number 42 in recent form ranking, but that's also why he's only $9,600 and why he's lower owned than some of these other guys around him. Because if Hideki had any sort of form at all heading into this event, if he had even been like top 15, top 20 when it comes to the recent form metrics, he would be $10,000. He would be swapped with a maybe even above Tommy Fleetwood when it comes to the pricing, and he'd be like 20% owned, like easily. He'd be like, everyone would say like he's the second best player by far in this kind of a field, but because he doesn't have that good a form, no one's given him that respect, which, by the way, these are the perfect kind of GPP plays that I try and get to because they're better players long-term than the price tag, which is kind of the exact opposite of Davis Riley, and which is why I'm fading him. It's almost out of principle alone on a week like this because now he's more expensive than he probably should be. So, you know, in theory, more often than not, you want to play the guys that are way too cheap and you want to try and avoid some of the players that are maybe a little bit too expensive. You wouldn't play Ryan Palmer with your money. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I don't even think that it's like if you have a bunch of donkey chalk that you have to play him, like that would be getting way too cute in my opinion. Like you have a bunch of donkey chalk, there are plenty of other guys that you can get different with. Let's see. Man, that news about James is tough. You said you saw that guy you saw that guy more than 95% of your friends. Yeah, man, he was always there for everyone. That's another thing with James that I liked is that he wasn't too big to interact with anyone, myself included. A boomer sooner. 100% retweet to you out there. Dude, Baker Mayfield's an absolute legend, by the way. I wasn't a big Baker guy until like the last year or so, but everything I've seen from the guy just, I don't know, he's an absolute legend. Let's see, where'd we leave off? It's $10 per. No idea what that's referring to. My bad. Let me know if that's what that's referring to. Going to miss those manjos. Me too, man. I was actually trying to find an audio clip to use for this live stream, but I think for the one we're doing at the US Open, we can try and incorporate that. Amen to that, man. Hughes flop lag. Yeah, I'm playing some Hughes this week. So what I like about Mackenzie Hughes is mostly the course fit. He plays well at tracks that aren't super off the tee heavy. I took him for the top 10 at plus 605, but he's about 7% owned as well. So a little bit of a leverage play, I would say. Either of those Svenssons in play didn't work out a few weeks back, but do we like them here? I would say that I'd go Adam over Jesper if I was choosing between the two. Neither one's my favorite play on a week like this, but Jesper's more of a long player off the tee, which kind of gets neutralized around Colonial, whereas an Adam Svensson is a more positional player. He's not a short player off the tee, but he's also not a bomber like you have with Jesper. So I would go with Adam potentially, but yeah, I'm at like a 4 or 5 out of 10 on both, I'd say. You don't like to share my slapdicks. There are your slapdicks. Yeah, I throw mine out there. Doesn't mean you have to tell them though, right? Like, let them be my slapdicks. It's like, I hate when people ask the questions about my slapdicks because then I have to let other people in on them. But hey, like I said, I'm going to do it for you guys here in the live stream, right? I'm not going to hold them all to myself. That wouldn't be fair. Rye 2 gloves should help with the sweaty palms. Yep. Yeah, and Nick, you got to let us know your slapdicks. That's only fair if you're down here in chat. You're saying Gerard will be steamed and moonwalked. Not sure you can do both at the same time. He said, Andrew says late tonight. He said, starting from the beginning, he said, thanks for the stream. Of course, man. Play Spieth when he's low owned. That is normally the role. That's at least what DGen would tell us. So I'm with you on that one. Andrew Putnam, a good fit? Yes, he is. So like, that's the reason why he's getting the steam. You guys may have heard me before saying he's close to 8% ownership. It's because in theory, this is an Andrew Putnam golf course. You play him at shorter tracks where it's more about the iron play and the putting. And that's exactly what we have this week. So I'm not completely against it. Say, can I help understand game theory between 150s and single entries? For sure. So 150 maxes, ownership's going to be a lot more spread out. And there's a couple reasons for that. First off, there's more entries, so there's more opportunity for more people to be played. But also in a 150 max, people have 150 lineups to work with. So when you're 150 maxer like myself, oftentimes your player pool in golf will be 30 to 40 players. In this case for me this week, over 40 players that I'm using in my player pool. On a week like that, that means that your super low owned players are still going to get some steam. Whereas in single entries where you're playing against less people, sometimes only a couple hundred entries that you're playing against, and you can only enter one lineup per person in those contests, you don't see people playing your Taylor Dixons. You don't see people playing slap dicks towards the bottom end of the board that they might take a shot on if they had more lineups to work with. So in those single entries, normally the strategy, or at least what you keep in mind when you're playing those contests, is that the chalk is going to be chalkier. So if you plan on playing chalk, that's okay because you're only entering against a couple hundred entries. You don't have to be as different in those sort of builds, but your leverage plays, you better still have 2 or 3 of them, but you're going to get a bunch of leverage on those kind of leverage plays because they're going to be even lower owned than what you have in the large field GBPs. So that's kind of the difference between it. Let me know if there's any other specifics that you're looking for. Oh, I see what you're saying. It's not like we all haven't seen the Terminator movies. So it's not even that kind of like scares me, Blake. I'm not going to go deep into the weeds here or anything. It's the byproduct on our brains. The lack of having to figure out things for yourselves. You know, we've all heard the horror stories from our grandparents, our parents about calculators, cell phones completely taking away aspects of life. And they're right about a lot of that, by the way. You know, as I get older, I tend to start to agree with some of my older counterparts when it comes to what they've been saying to me. And this feels the same way. And I might just be an older person at this point. I mean, I'm towards my 30s now, getting close to 30. And maybe it's just that I'm an old. And AI is something that olds don't understand, but that's the way I see it, man, is I feel like it's that same kind of idea, like the calculator's dumbing people down. Say, good luck, you mother fathers. Luke, you're killing it. Hey, I appreciate that, Jordan. Thank you for that. So thoughts on Seabez. So Christian Bezainhout, a name that I saw thrown around by a few content creators this week, and it's mostly because of how he played last week, I would assume, because the form isn't that great over the last 12 rounds, but he was trending in the right direction at a very difficult golf course. And Quail Hollow is not a golf course that really fits his style of golf. So if he was able to finish in the top 25, top 30 like he did, I think that is especially impressive for Seabez. So if you want to try and be early to him, I think this is a spot where you could do it because he's not going to be overly chalky at $7,500. I will say that there's still risk involved though, because we haven't seen him sustain that form for more than a week or two at a time. But I do like what we've seen recently. Always play the low owned Decky and Spieth. Amen to that. $10 per F-bomb. You're saying, okay, we can do that, Josh. And how many is it, by the way? I know it's at least one. Cover your ears of any, I mean this literally, by the way, cover the ears of any little ones around. You have 3 seconds. Fuck. Okay, now we owe $50. Okay. And don't say I didn't warn you guys. I gave you guys some time to cover and mute the mic. Does Hostler set up well? Not particularly well, Kim. He's a good bent grass putter, so that's a data point that is working in his favor, but I wouldn't say that he sets up that well for this golf course. Glad to finally catch me live. Glad to finally have you down there, Kep. It's been a few minutes. Always glad to have you down there. We don't play Donkey Chalk unless we do. Amen to that. That is the wise man's words. You love weeks like this, helps you learn and tweak your process to get better. That's always the goal with these. So, hey, any questions, feel free to let me know. He said, you never play Spieth because he sucks. That's a take and a half. I'll let you have your terrible take, though. He's not a terrible player. Sipping some ranch water from that OG, the good stuff. All in on Pavin, ultimate short game specialist. I know you're saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek, I'm guessing, with Corey Pavin towards the bottom. But you aren't wrong. He's a good short game player. But, yeah, I don't play senior tour guys. That's, I think, a pretty good rule to live by as well. Play him on the senior tour DFS. Gerard, top 5. Okay. I like the hot takes from chat. Pretty decent number on the top 5. You're probably getting 12 to 15 to 1 on that. So I'm not against that sort of a bet. Skynet. Yeah, dude, the AI stuff, by the way, is kind of scary. He said directly from DGen's notes, you're a Nick Taylor slut. Hey, guys, you heard it here first. I don't know if Nick Taylor's playing this week. In fact, if he is, he's gone completely under my radar, but you can keep an eye on that. When I say 6.5 out of 10, what is a 10 out of 10 for reference? 10 out of 10 is Scotty Scheffler. 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10 is a Harris English for me this week. Like my core plays are when I start to get to that kind of range where there might only be like 1-2 reasons at most that I can think not to play somebody. Scotty Scheffler is a 10 out of 10 this week. There's only one reason not to play him, and that's the ownership at like 44%. That's what constitute those kind of rankings. Luke already, that old guy yelling at the neighbors to keep their radio down. That's what I'm saying, man. I'm 28 years old and saying this stuff. Maybe I'm just an old. Yes, Luke, you love it. I appreciate you guys. You said, thanks for powering through, of course. It's, hey, not easy to do this, but like I said, this has been very healing for me. Being able to hang out with you guys. Like I said, I've had similar issues in my past that I've gone through where it's been the same way. So I appreciate you guys being there for me as well. Your favorite quote from DGen is he's allergic to success on Patrick Rogers. That's what I said about Rory for a while until he went out there and ended up winning the Masters. So I guess there's always the Ori could with P-Rod too. Thoughts on Stevens, McCarty, and Cole. So I gave some of my thoughts on McCarty before, but I'm at a 5.5 out of 10 on him. Don't really have a hot take either way. I am playing him though. Cole, one of my favorite plays this week, Blake. I'm at like an 8.5 out of 10 on an Eric Cole. Reason why I say that is he fits these shorter, more positional style golf courses well. He's playing really good golf. He's a number 18 model ranking play on the week. He's top 30 at the recent form. So yeah, sign me up there. Thoughts on Perez? 5.5, 6 out of 10. Another guy that plays well, like the shorter kind of courses. But let me get a sip of water, guys. You can tell my voice is abandoning me a little bit. But yeah, Perez, the kind of guy that plays well at the shorter kind of tracks, so you could take it. Have I ever bet any of the listed par markets? You thought Nico Etch listed for par 3 winner at 100 to 1 was interesting. I have not, Jordan, just because like you'd have to find a real edge. So let me know what you're thinking on that one. Is Echeverria just a really good par 3 scorer? It would make sense because he's a really good consistent iron player and gain strokes with a putter. So you could look at that. Glad we went the whole show without anyone mentioning cheesesteak. Let's keep it that way. Oh, Nick, you're doing it to yourself, man. Mentioning Tom Hoagie. I'm playing Tom Hoagie this week, so I'd be okay if everyone else doesn't want to use them. What do I think about Chad Ramey? 3.5 out of 10. Not much positive to say, I'll be honest. He said, Nick, that's what you had for dinner. Definitely a sign. I guess we got to do the deep dive. We're staying away from that. No. I'm playing them. I have a feeling you're playing them too, Brant. I know Ross and Nick probably are. Let's not steam him up anymore. I will say, though, he plays well at short positional tracks. He won at Pebble Beach before. Could be in play this week, just saying. And you're the cheesesteak whisperer. You heard it from the guy himself. He said, props to answering so many questions. Yeah, dude, I've got to say, guys, you've really killed it with all the kindness, all the support that you've showed on this live stream here. We've never had this many questions before. I mean, I was supposed to be live on my channel, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I know it's a week where I wanted to spend some time with you guys. We can get together, try and heal a little bit. So that's why I've gone overtime. In fact, I'm going to have to do the live stream for props a little bit later now, but it's totally fine. I'd rather answer all of your questions and get through this together. On to 20 max, how many should be in my player pool? Oh, great question. you want to be pretty consolidated when you're only going with like 20 lineups. So what a 50 max player like myself might have 30 to 40 players in their player pool, give or take probably 5 in either direction. A 20 max though, you're probably looking at 12 to 18 players, I would say, in that sort of a pool. So you really want to consolidate that. And it kind of depends on how aggressive you want to be. More than likely though, you're going to be in that like 16 to 18 player range, I would say, in that contest. Sam Stevens. So yeah, sorry if I didn't answer your question on that one a little bit earlier. I like the form on Stevens. Like last 12 measured rounds, if we bring up his shots gained profile, if I could type it right, at least. Let's bring up the right Stevens. So you can see gaining in every category but the approach play. And the one thing about Stevens, though, is that he does struggle with the wedges. This golf course isn't favorable from that aspect, as you're going to have a lot of clubs from 150 yards and in. But the form elsewhere has been excellent for Sam. So yeah, he's like a 5-6 out of 10, I would say. Is it fair enough? Yeah, we gotta keep him low owned, right? I feel like a lot of us are going to be playing Hoagie this week too. He said, yes, he is first on tour in the par 3 scoring, especially in that range. I like that, Jordan. And yeah, that's why I asked for the take on that, because I figured you were looking at those sort of stats. 100 to 1. Now, we know it's a long shot, but if you're telling me that the advanced analytics are checking boxes, then I would for sure consider that. Now, Hard Rock Bet doesn't have that market posted, or else I would tell you myself. But anyone out there that maybe wants a super long shot bet on something that's fun, maybe look at that one. And you're saying first on your model, but 4th in the par 3 scoring. That's good enough for me. I mean, 4th in par 3 scoring is amazing. He said he got to go, but killer stuff. DJ up there smiling down on us. I appreciate you, man, and the kind words there. He said, thank you for being there for all of us at the healing. Thank you guys for being able to do that as well. So let's go through a few of the other players that I wanted to point out in the player pool. Like I said, we've gone a little bit over time, but I'm totally cool with that. But a few things we need to wrap up on before we get on out of here. So I wanted to point out Tom Kim. I know we had the question about him before, but this is the kind of player that you should be looking at on a week like this. And it's really only in large field GPPs where I would play a Tom Kim. But if you're not looking at bounce back candidates, like on legit, really good tour players, like a Tom Kim, then you're not playing the game the right way this week, because you're going to have like the overpriced guys that are playing good form over the last 2-3 weeks that everyone wants to play in like 10 to 15% of your lineups. Then you're going to have your Tom Kims that nearly won signature events last year, multiple time tour winner, Tom Kim, between the Shriners Children's Open and the Wyndham Championship that he was able to take home, priced around guys that have never won before in some cases and that are double the ownership of a Tom Kim. If you're not looking, and I'm not saying that Tom Kim has to be the kind of pivot that you're using yourself, but you should be looking at these long-term high pedigree players and trying to find maybe 1 or 2 to fit into your player pool. Another example of a player that I like would be an Echevarria. So I know we just had the question about him with the par 3 scoring stuff, but Echevarria is more of a second shot player than anything. When we were looking at the shots gained metrics before, gaining heavily on approach and with the putter, and at this style of golf course. I mean, last week at the PGA Championship, he was up there in contention for a lot of the week, and that was at an off the tee heavy golf course. So kind of like a Seabass, who I'm not as high on Seabass myself, but he's that same kind of thing. If these kind of guys could play well at Quail Hollow, and then now you put them on a golf course that more fits their game, imagine the kind of bounce back that you could see from them when it comes to their form over the last few months. So that's why I'm looking at an Echevarria at this sort of event. And then I'm also looking at a Bo Hostler, who this is more of a GPP pivot play in that 6K range, but rather than a Putnam, who's going to be like 8% owned, I'd rather take a Hostler, who's 4 times lower owned than an Andrew Putnam that maybe isn't playing as solid of golf. But you've got to realize that Putnam and a lot of his top level finishes lately have come in alternate field events. Myrtle Beach Classic sort of fields where it's a lot easier to go out there and gain strokes to the field, and not so much your big time fields like signature level fields where a lot of your 8 and 9K guys are gaining strokes. And Bo Hostler has also played in some of those alternate field events, but it's worth noting that sure, the form does favor an Andrew Putnam, but it's not like he's 4 times more likely to succeed than a Bo Hostler is over that same kind of sample size. So you're going to see me using these kind of players as pivots off of that kind of donkey chalk to get differentiation and give me a way to still play guys like Scotty Scheffler up top. Because if I'm going to play somebody that's 44% owned, we're going to have to really offset that when it comes to the ownership at some point. So something that we're keeping in mind with all the builds that we're entering. and something that you should be keeping in mind when building your player pool as well. The other thing I wanted to go through as well would be some strategy on DraftKings. So we're going to bring up some lineups and talk through that here together. We're going to build 1 or 2 lineups together, show you that lineup construction. Before we do so, though, do want to go through some of the contests that are available, which you can see on here are filling as we're here speaking. The Sand Trap, the big $25, just filled at about 33,000 entries. The Big Drive the Green, which I won 50 maxed myself, has also filled at just under 60,000 entries. So it looks like quite a few people are still playing PGA DFS this week, even with it being after a major, usually a lot of a hangover after these kind of weeks. But the fields and the kind of contests available actually aren't all that terrible. Like they even have a secondary 25 that they've already posted. They've still got some single entries that you can enter. Like I already maxed out this $100 single entry, also this secondary $100 single entry that they have posted, but they've got a $200 single entry that I might throw in an entry with myself. There's about 100 spots remaining there. So if you're going to get in there, be quick before it fills. And even this one here, I believe it's another single entry that has just under 300 total entries. That's where I'd be putting my money at this point, because some of the smaller secondary GPPs don't usually have the best payout structure. Like this one here's a 6th to 1st place, which actually isn't terrible. It's a hair better than what they have with this primary, but it's a smaller GPP, so you're not going to see as big of payouts in that kind of contest. Same thing with the Sand Trap, and the Sand Trap is a 5th to 1st place, so still pretty top heavy with 20K of the 100K going to that first position. So yeah, if you're late to the party, if you haven't gotten your entries reserved quite yet, it'd be a lot of single entries for me. Maybe like 50 entries into that smaller Drive the Green. Probably wouldn't 150 max it, with it only having about 7,000 entries in it. So the contest selection is dwindling down just because it is so late into the week. The one thing I would say about this contest selection, though, is that if you're waiting to Wednesdays to reserve your entries, is you might want to bump that up just one day. I'd say if you go on Tuesday morning, you're going to have the full selection on every single contest on DraftKings. And if there's ever any really good contests out there, like ones without any sort of rake, maybe ones where the payout structure is like perfect, like the $18 10 max, the $10 18 max that you had posted for DJ and his baby on these sort of sites, then you've got to get in there on Tuesday, because that $10 18 max was filled yesterday morning. So those kind of contests, if you want to get into them, you've got to make it a little bit more of a priority to get those in earlier in the week. In terms of our lineup construction, though, what I really want to focus on is making sure that you have enough differentiation. And we have mentioned that plenty throughout this live stream already, but making sure that you have enough differentiation in your lineups is really the only thing you have to worry about, because it's not Sunday Showdown. We're not really worried about the placement points, at least in my opinion, based on what I see with the weather, unless you're purposefully trying to find some correlation in a stack. I don't see a massive weather edge on a week like this either. So personally, going to be all about the ownership, just making sure that whether it's with lineup construction or with the actual ownership and the product ownership of my 6 players, making sure that one of those 2 is giving me that way to get different. So let's start with the Scotty Scheffler up top and kind of show you the 2 different lineup construction approaches that you're going to see. If you're using a Scotty, it forces you to the bottom end of the 7K range. And what I think you're going to see a lot of people do is play a Scotty, maybe have their second man in is like Gerard at 7,900. I think he's going to be a very popular second man in, and then you're just going to live in the 7K range. And by the way, what we're doing here is this is not a lineup that I would enter myself. This is more so what I see a lot of the field doing. So an Eric Cole is going to be exceptionally popular on a week like this. Who else is going to be super popular? I guess Bud Colley, going to be used by quite a few people, but maybe he's a little bit too expensive to throw into that sort of lineup. Let's use a McCarty at $7,200. Let's throw in I don't know, there's not that much chalk in this range. Maybe a Highsmith after his top level finish at the PGA Championship. The really chalky lineup construction that you see with the Scotty Scheffler is going to be to take Scotty and then live with the 7K range, maybe one 6K range player. If you want to get different when using Scotty Scheffler and do it with the lineup construction itself, like I was saying before, it's being more aggressive with your second man in. Maybe taking one of these guys towards the top end of the 8K range, like a Brian Harman, maybe even spending up for a Siwoo Kim if you can make it work, because a lot of people aren't going to be willing to do so. And by doing that, it does force us a little bit more into the 6K range. But if there are guys down here that you think are playable this week, let's throw in a Damon just for shits and gigs. I don't think he's a terrible play. Let's throw in a Sam Ryder at $6,800. Now you're back up to $7,000. for your last 2 players. So I would say that the impact of going up to that sort of player really isn't all that much. I mean, you're still playing slapdicks towards the bottom end of the board. It's just now you're on a lineup construction that's going to be a little bit less owned than what you saw with that more balanced lineup construction. So I think if you're going to play Scotty, the obvious place to get different is with your players down low, but don't be afraid to kind of consider going to some outside lineup constructions. Like you could be even more aggressive about it and go like Scotty and then a Hideki Matsuyama as your second man in. Either way you go about it though, these could be different ways to get different to what the rest of the field is doing. So that's what I would consider in your large field GPPs when using Scotty Scheffler. But on the flip side, if you're not going with the Scotty Scheffler lineup, as I was mentioning before, I think there's a clear way that people are going to build. So let's throw in a Daniel Berger just because he's the chalkiest guy towards the top. A lot of guys that start with a Berger aren't going to take like a Fleetwood and a Berger together. It's going to be a lot of Bergers dropping down to maybe a Poston as your second man in, more of this like balanced kind of lineup where you're taking guys across different salary ranges in the same lineup. That puts you at about 7,400 remaining for your last 3 players. And they could throw in like a Gerard here. You could let's throw in a cheesesteak hoagie into this sort of like a dummy lineup. This sort of lineup construction that is balanced, pretty much incorporates every portion of the board, is I think how most people are going to build when you don't have Scotty Scheffler. In my opinion, if you want to get a little bit different about it, it might be to play Fleetwood, go Berger as your second man in, be a little bit more aggressive with your salary towards the top. Heck, maybe even throw in a Keith Mitchell for some added leverage at $9,000. Skip the 8K range, which I think in lineups without Scotty is going to be hammered by a lot of the people out there, and then now drop into the 7K range and find some sub 5% owned players. And if these guys in the 7K range that you're playing aren't super high owned, if maybe rather than an Eric Cole is closer to 5 to 10% ownership, you go with somebody that's a little bit more overlooked, like a Gary Woodland, then that's another way to add even more leverage on top of that. So as you can see here, it's not just the type of ownership, the product ownership that matters in these lineups. It's the actual lineup construction and where you're spending your salary that is also going to help you get different to the field. And I think where we really focus on that lineup construction and adding in extra differentiation is especially in the large field GPPs, because if you add in low product ownership and a lineup construction that isn't used that much, you're going to have virtually 0 duplicates. Like no one's going to have that same combination of you when you have both of those factors working in your favor, which is why I always tell people to get a little bit wacky when it comes to how you're building your lineups. And it's kind of hard to do that with an optimizer at times. It's oftentimes a lot easier to force in wacky lineup constructions when you're building by hand. And the reason for that is the optimizers always try and stick to, some of the best lineups that you can possibly spit out. I mean, that's why we use optimizers to begin with. But if you're trying to get more creative about the lineups that you're entering, you can do that on optimizers if you add in rules. For example, like setting limits or even minimum exposures to certain groups of players in your lineups. But doing it by hand makes that process a whole lot easier. So when I'm in single entries and I'm trying to differentiate myself by using lineup construction, I do a lot of that by hand. And I think doing it with an optimizer, even to me at this point, I'm always willing to learn. So if anyone has any good strategies for making groups and being able to pull that off even easier, I am all ears when it comes to being able to pull that off. But that's it for the lineup construction segment, guys. You just want to make sure that you're getting enough differentiation into your lineups that you're not going to duplicate yourself with other people in GPPs, and also to make sure that when your players hit, when let's say you get somebody that finishes top 5, top 10, that'd be exactly what we're hoping for, that you're not sharing them with 30% of the field. You might do that with Scotty. Scotty's got so much top level equity that I really could not say that it's a good idea to go out there and fade him. But the rest of the board, like your 8K, 7K guys, if you get an 8K guy right, you don't want them to be 30% owned. And the guy that everyone used in their lineups, you ideally want them to be 3 to 4% owned so that only that small percentage of the field is getting that same benefit as you. So that's why we focus on the lineup construction so much, why the ownership is such a big factor in our process, and maybe even more so than the player pool, whether a lot of the strategy stuff that we talked about before, getting that differentiation and forcing in getting different to the field is maybe the most important aspect that you can take from this kind of a live stream. So that's all I've got, guys, here for the live stream this week. I know it was a longer one than usual, a lot more that we had to talk about on this sort of a show. I will go over any last second questions that you've got in the chat. So if you still have any of those, feel free to go ahead and fire those down below. But smash that like button if you guys have already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Just like this live stream that we're still doing here, going to keep the show going for rounds 2 through 4 as well. And I think that's what James would have wanted us to continue, just to keep deep diving all of the, stuff that we normally would, so that, as time goes on, we can hang out as friends, move through this whole situation together, and remember the big guy and his legacy that he's leaving to us. So subscribe so you guys don't miss those live streams for rounds 2 through 4. But I hope to see your names towards the top end of those leaderboards. I know a lot of you guys are rocking the new special logo on the SHIPIT Nation channel, dedicated towards James. So maybe some good luck juju with some of those logos. We can see them in first, second place in a lot of those big contests. I know that would make the big guy happy up there in heaven. So let's make this a good slate. Let's do it for the big guy. Let's crush those contests and all of our exposure. For all the prop and betting stuff for round number 1, that was supposed to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel, but that's obviously not going to be the case. So for tonight, guys, that's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So in just a little bit over 20 minutes, I'll get a little bit of rest, a little bit of water and a snack in me before we start that second live stream. I will go through all the underdog and prize pick stuff. So it'll be for round 1 props on the sports books with like strokes, birdies, greens regulation. All of that will be touched on in the live stream, as well as all the matchups and 3 balls for round number 1. So if you're on like DraftKings, FanDuel, underdog, prize picks, as I was saying, that's what that live stream is going to be for. And that's going to be on the GSLukeDFS YouTube channel. So you can find that on YouTube. Just type in GSLukeDFS. That's Grand Slam Luke. That's what the GS stands for, DFS. And that's also on X/Twitter as well. But start time for that is going to be 9 p.m. Eastern. Like I said, much longer live stream than what I was accounting for, but that is totally okay. Stevens, 9 out of 11 cuts in Texas. Another reason that he's probably a good play. I could see, and you're saying it's his home course too. That's some good stuff, man. You said, started following DFS with me, DGen, and Pat Mayo. You're glad DGen moved to SHIPIT and you appreciate it. Absolutely, man. And you're an OG then. You've been around for a while. Absolutely. My condolences, man. That's what I got to say. All of us OGs, man. I mean, it hits everyone hard, but especially the people that have been around since the beginning. It's tough, man. Everyone honoring James by filling that contest early. Yeah, dude. Going back to the lineup construction, dude, that filled early Tuesday. So, I mean, it fills early a lot of times, but it filled real early this week. That's for damn sure. At 40% owned, if Scotty wins and you fade, you're screwed. 100% agree. So Luke Tambo and the Godfather Pat Mayo will get us through this great loss. I appreciate the kind words, man. That's kind of my hope, at least with these live streams, is that we can try and heal a little bit. And like I said, we're here for everyone out there if you guys need anything. On FanDuel, Harmon's 10-3 and Riley's 10-4. Surely Harmon's going to go under-owned. Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, 10-4 is super expensive, but game theory-wise, it could make some sense. I appreciate you, DCC. Nathan Drake says, thanks for the words, Luke. Still remember subbing to James. You were a 6 sub. Yeah, dude. I remember seeing his first video where he actually mentioned like his live stream was made as like a bet against one of his buddies. Like he didn't know whether he'd get 1,000 subscribers. And I remember telling him, I was like, dude, you're going to get that in like a month. And I'm not sure if he got to 1,000 in quite a month. It may have taken just over that. But I mean, his friends thought he couldn't do it in a year or something like that. And then he goes out there and does it in like a month and a half. Absolute legend. And yeah, man, so the people that have been here since the beginning, just like I said, it's tough for a lot of us. Great show, Luke. Let's take down some contests. Amen to that. And do I think the mini max is a good contest? Yeah, it's okay. Actually, the payout structure is better than some of like the bigger GPPs, a little bit less top heavy. So yeah, I'd say for like the large field GPPs, it's one of the better ones out there. You said in a week where you have one guy ahead, head and shoulders above the rest. Is this a balanced lineup more optimal? So I don't know, man. So that's kind of tough, deep. I'm not sure which way I would say is optimal. I would say that there's like good pros and cons for going with the kind of balanced lineup construction, and then good pros and cons for going for the more studs and duds. I mean, if you play Scotty Scheffler, you're getting good win equity, which is always welcomed in a single entry. But if you go with the more balanced lineup, you get a lot more top 20 equity because you can take like 3 or 4 guys in the 8-9K range that their top 20 numbers are sometimes close to minus money or like plus 110, plus 150 at the very worst. It's kind of, you got to balance that, right? Because like on one hand, you got to have the winner, like Blake was saying before, or I think it was Blake. Somebody was saying like, if 40% owns Scotty wins, you're screwed. It's 100% true. Like that's definitely the case. But if he doesn't win and you go with the balanced lineup and you have 4 guys that are top 20, then you're in the driver's seat. I mean, you're going to be in a perfect position to try and take something down. It's a tough one in my opinion. You said, need those kind words, Luke. Still remember. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. And yeah, we saw, I guess you're catching up to us of where we're on right now. I appreciate you, Nathan. I remember you from a long time back too. You've been around these channels for a long, long time. Best of luck out there, Brian. Best of luck to everyone with all of your exposure this week. And let's have ourselves a week for the big guy.